Now, as you may know, I tend to prefer earphones with warmer signatures, but a bunch of you have been telling me for a while to check out the Audio-Technica ATH IMO2 because apparently it's a really good, balanced, lean, analytical sounding earphone. Well, I did check them out. What do I think? Today's review was brought to you by these fantastic individuals. You can join the viewers supporting this channel by heading over to patreon.com/LachlanLikesAthing. Thanks. Hello and welcome to Lachlan Likes a Thing, the show where I take a thing and see whether or not I like it. Now the thing we're looking at in this video is the Audio-Technica ATH IMO2 dual balanced armature in-ear earphone. Now, my friend Thomas helped me get these from earphone in Japan for something like $140 US, and I think Amazon street prices are actually quite similar for this earphone. This is a dual balanced armature earphone, and I don't really tend to look at many balanced armature earphones on this channel, but there are a number of advantages to them. First of all, balanced armatures allow earphones to have compact sealed designs. The IMO2 has an around ear cable design which distributes most of the weight of the earphone on the ear guides and the outer ear. The translucent plastic shell is well built and, as a neat bonus, allows you to examine the balanced armature drivers inside. The IMO2 shares a very similar design with the ATH IM50, though it's overall smaller in dimensions. The IMO2 isn't completely a negative profile design and does stick out of the ears a little more than something like the Shure SE215, but it's by no means bulky or awkward. So because of the IMO2's compact and fully sealed design, the IMO2 gets really good noise isolation. It blocks out a lot of external noise, and this is something that you tend to get with balanced armature earphones because you can have that fully sealed design. The other nice thing about the IMO2 is that it's a very comfortable earphone. We have these ear guides here that help distribute the weight. Oddly enough, I don't find this earphone quite as comfortable as the ATH IM50, and I can't be quite sure why that is, but I do have to insert them a little further into my ear just to make sure that they stay stable. But overall, they're very comfortable. Very, very ergonomically sound. The IMO2 has the same detachable cables that I like so much on the ATH IM50. To recap, they are sturdy cables with an interesting 2-pin configuration that is the inverse of many other detachable cable mechanisms on the market today. I think it's reliable and not as prone to wear and tear or damage as other solutions. Overall, in terms of ergonomics, the IMO2 is a really nice, sensible overall package. I think it's actually better than my previous favorite in the ergonomics department, which would be the Shure SE215. The IMO2 has a sturdier detachable cable mechanism. It has a better overall build, and it offers similar levels of noise isolation and comfort. The only area where the SE215 still trumps the IMO2 is that the SE215 has more of a curved shape, so it's easier to sleep on. Other than that, I think the IMO2 trumps the SE215 easily. So when I was reading about the IMO2 online, I saw a lot of people comparing them to the Etymotic ER4S, and that had me a little worried because I know that there are a lot of fans of the Etymotic house sound. I myself recognize that they are a clean and detailed sounding earphone, but for me, I just find them a little too brittle and a little too lean for my tastes. And I find that they lack bass for a lot of the music that I listen to. So I was a little worried that I just simply wouldn't like these, despite the fact that a lot of people urged me to try them out. Once I did, however, I was surprised to find that the IMO2 doesn't sound as similar to the Etymotic as I was led to expect. Now, the IMO2 is definitely a clean, balanced sounding earphone. It has a real sense of speed and detail and clarity, and it has a really nice even mix of frequency. So I can definitely see where people are coming from with the comparison to the Etymotic. However, unlike the Etymotic, I find that the IMO2 is actually somewhat of a warmer sounding earphone, just slightly warmer than neutral. It has a slight emphasis on the lower mids, particularly where kind of the lower ranges of male vocals sound. It does this without sounding congested or chesty, but it does have that slight overall emphasis in the lower mids. It also has a surprisingly punchy bass tone. Now, it's bass that is very fast and it's very punchy, but it lacks the kind of visceral or sort of resonant rumble that you might hear in a dynamic driver earphone. So for some people that's going to be really good because it's really fast and punchy kind of bass that doesn't have a great deal of extra decay. For other people, they might prefer their bass to have a bit more meat to it. Now, generally, I prefer a lot more of a kind of resonant bass tone, but I have to say I very much still enjoy the kind of fast bass that the IMO2 provides. The treble on the IMO2 is interesting, and this is probably the reason why I think it sounds a bit warmer than neutral. The treble on the IMO2 is quite detailed, but it is smoothed over. So I would actually say that it's a little shelved, it's a little rolled off, and as a result, the IMO2 doesn't really bring out a lot of sibilance. It doesn't bring out a lot of harshness in a recording, but by the same token, it can sound just a little blunted in the treble, and I think it compresses the soundstage a little, and that's probably my biggest complaint with the IMO2 sound. Now, something like the VSonic GR07, I think, has a treble spike that I prefer because it gives treble a bit more texture, a bit more energy, overall a bit more shimmer, so it sounds a bit more spacious and detailed and resolving in the treble. But I know that for a lot of people, the GR07 is a little too thin in the treble, and the IMO2 will make a really kind of smooth, good compromise. There are some graphs of the IMO2 over at goldenears.net that can show you visually what I'm talking about, and you can find a link to those graphs in the description of this video. So I'm going to talk about some technical things about the IMO2 that are really important to know if you are thinking of getting them. First of all, the IMO2 is a very, very sensitive earphone, and that means that it will tend to pick up a lot of hiss from various source players that you wouldn't ordinarily hear on some other earphones. So for instance, the IMO2 easily picks up the hiss on the NWZ A15, and it will be something that you hear during quieter passages of music. So if your source player has a bit of hiss like this Sony Walkman, I don't necessarily recommend the IMO2, though it is fine with something like the iPhone 5S. Can't hear any hiss on that. The other thing about the IMO2 is that, like a lot of multi-balanced armature sets, it has a really erratic impedance sort of curve. So it has an impedance that is anywhere between just below 24 ohms, going right up to 150 ohms at the higher frequencies. And you can have a look at this impedance curve over at goldenears.net. They do have a nice graph that you can check out, and I put the link in the description of this video if you want to see that. The IMO2 doesn't have a crazy impedance response. It doesn't drop down to 8 ohms like some other balanced armature sets, but the kind of product of that impedance curve is that it will sound different on different players depending on that player's output impedance. Because the impedance changes according to frequency, the amount of voltage the player delivers to the earphone will change at different frequencies. And if the player has a high source, high output impedance, that will also contribute to that difference in voltage. So it will, long and short of it is, it will sound different on different players depending on output impedance. And if you apply the 1/8 rule of thumb, you really don't want to use the IMO2 with a source player that has a output impedance higher than 3 ohms. That's what you generally want to avoid. Otherwise, it will maybe start to sound a little wonky. You might find that it won't sound as bassy. Not too sure what will happen because I don't have that many source players with high output impedances. That is something to be aware of if you are thinking of getting the IMO2. It's worth looking at what your source player has in terms of output impedance, and not every manufacturer lists that figure. But I've got some more information that I've linked in the description of this video about this issue. You can have a look at NWAV Guy's thoughts or Golden Ear's explanation of impedance matching. Provided that you are using the right kind of source player, I think the IMO2 is a really great earphone. It's got a really balanced all-rounder sound, and that's basically why I haven't actually pointed out any examples of music that work especially well with the IMO2, because most genres tend to work well with this sound signature. I actually find, interestingly enough, that it's a really good earphone for listening to podcasts because it has that slight mid-tone emphasis. It tends to lift, it tends to give a bit more body to vocals when people talk, but it does this without introducing any sort of harshness or sibilance in the treble, and that's really nice. It's a really good all-rounder. Now, if you want your earphone to be balanced, but you still want a bit more of a punchy, a bit more of an aggressive sound, and you want a bit, just a more treble kind of detail and that kind of aggression, I would still be really, really happy to recommend the VSonic GR07. I think that overall, the GR07 does sound more exciting and detailed than the IMO2, while still remaining overall quite a neutral and balanced sounding earphone. And that's still going to be my sort of go-to recommendation because it's a bit cheaper than the IMO2. But as an overall package, I am happy to recommend the IMO2 over my sort of next available option, which was the Shure SE215. I think the IMO2 does a lot of things like the SE215. It has a all-round kind of sound, but it sounds more clean and balanced than the SE215. It's just as comfortable. It isolates just as well. It has a sturdier build and it has better detachable cables. The only drawback is that you can't really sleep on it quite as easily. Other than that, I think the IMO2 is a really sensible, complete overall package. If you want something that's warmer and sort of more lush in the vocals, you can look at the IMO3 and the IMO4, which I have had a chance to listen to. Compared to the IMO2, they are more lush in the sort of vocals, but they don't really sound balanced like the IMO2 does. And I actually think, considering how much less the IMO2 costs compared to the IMO3 and the IMO4, the IMO2 is the best value out of the entire series. So the IMO2 is definitely a thing that I like. Now, thanks again to everyone who helped get the IMO2 on the channel. And if you would like to join the viewers supporting the channel, you can do that by heading over to patreon.com/LachlanLikesAthing. You can also talk to me on Facebook at facebook.com/LachlanLikesAthing or on Twitter at LachLikesAthing. Thanks to all my regular subscribers and happy listening.